Hello everyone and welcome back to Classic Dune. And today I'm going to be talking to you all about the strengths and strategies of the Ixians in Classic Dune. Now, the Ixians are one of the, I'd say, three factions that deals with cards, treasure cards that is, during the bidding phase. And I would personally rate them as one of the, if not the strongest factions in the game. So let's just go ahead and start with their at-start advantages. So they have 6 forces, 3 cyborgs, and suboids. Those are their special types of forces that we'll get into later on. And they're going to start in the hidden mobile stronghold. Now, this is their own special stronghold that starts off the board, but they're going to place it after the storm moves. And it counts as a stronghold in all normal ways, but it very specially cannot be shipped into by anyone else. And we'll get into that as well a little bit later. They're going to start with 10 spice. So in terms of starting positions, the Ixians have a fairly good one. They've got 10 spice and 6 forces on the board. Plus, they're in a stronghold. So they're right up there with the Trades and the Harkonnen in terms of good starting positions. They've got 1 free revival, which isn't great. And they are going to have a really neat start game ability, which is when you're going to be dealing out everyone's starting treachery cards. So you're going to get 1 card for each faction. So let's say we're doing a 6-player game here. You're going to take those cards, randomly from the deck, of course. You're going to look at them, and you're going to take whichever one you want. Now, this is a great ability, not only because you get to always get the best card that's dealt out, but you also know what other cards are dealt out. Now, the thing is you will shuffle the remaining cards before you deal them, so you won't know what people get, you just know what they could get. And it should be noted that it's a little bit unclear in the rules, but if you are playing with Harkonnen, then you will add an extra card to this pile, because they start with 2 cards instead of 1, so this should be factored in. Alright, then next, we've got their bidding advantage. So similarly to the ad start advantage, what you're going to do is you're going to take however many cards are going to be bid on during each bidding round, plus 1. You're going to look through them and choose 1 card to put on either the top or the bottom of the deck. So again, let's say 6-player game, 6 people can bid. You're going to grab 6 plus 1, so 7 cards. You're going to take a look, and you get to suppress one of these. So let's say, I don't know, I don't want that Karama getting out because I don't want my abilities Karamaed. I'll take it, and then I have a choice. I can put it either on the top of the deck or on the bottom of the deck. Now, there is a pretty important decision to be made when you do this, because if it's a card that you never want to see, like a really strong card or a defense that you have a weapon for, you probably wouldn't put it on the bottom of the deck. You want to bury it, never see it again until the deck gets reshuffled. But if it's a good card you just don't want up for bid yet, you can put it on the top of the deck, and then it'll come into play next turn, and then you can choose what you want to do with it. This factors in really well with their alliance ability, which I will discuss later on. Now, their next ability is their cyborgs and suboids. So, kind of like the Emperor and the Fremen, they have special starred forces, except these ones work very differently to other factions. So, the cyborgs are pretty similar. They're 2 strength always, 1 if they're not if spice isn't spent for them. However, there's no limit on how many they can revive per turn, like the Emperor and Fremen do. So the Sardaukar and the Fedaykin, you can only get 1 of them per turn, no matter what. No way to break that. But the cyborgs, they have no such limit. You can revive as many as you want every turn. And they have 7 of them total, which is, again, more than both the Emperor and the Fremen. The only downside to this is that they have 1 free revival, and cyborgs cost 3 spice to revive, instead of only 2 like normal. Now, then you've got their suboids. So they've got the 13 suboids to make up 20. And these guys are also kind of special. So they're mostly kind of supportive troops. So they are only worth 0.5 no matter what. And you cannot spice style them to make them 1. The advantage, though, is that you don't have to spice style them in advanced. So it's not like one suboid is worth a quarter and then you buff it up to a half. No, it's just flat 0.5 strength no matter what. Now, the interesting thing with the suboids is that you can use them to take losses for cyborgs. So let's say you've got your hidden mobile stronghold here. We've got 3 suboids and 3 cyborgs here. Now, the maximum dial with this is 7. So it's 6 from the 3 cyborgs and then 1.5 from the 3 suboids. However, let's say you only dial 6. You dial these 3 cyborgs. When it comes to taking losses, if you win the battle, of course, you would normally have to lose these forces that you dialed. But the suboids, they have a special power where if the suboids aren't being dialed, they can take the place of a dialed cyborg. So I dial 6 here. These would normally go away, but instead I kill the suboids. And now I still have this 6 worth of forces in the territory. I don't have to revive them. I don't have to ship them back down to the planet. Really great ability for suffering losses over many turns. It's very difficult to chip away at the Ixian forces by attrition. So this is a really strong ability. These suboids, very cheap. I mean, they're the same to revive as normal forces, and the same to ship. But you don't have to spy style them, and you can use to take losses. So if you play well, and you never need to max dial, you could almost think that the Ixians have 22 strength forces. Now, that's only if you never have to max dial anything. But if you play well, then you can really get a lot of use out of these cyborgs and suboids. So the main downside with this is that the main bulk of your army is not very strong. Like this 9 stack or even 10 stack worth of forces is only ever worth 5, and it can't be worth any more than that. Your real strength comes from the cyborgs. So if you don't have cyborgs in a territory, it's going to be really tough to win a battle there. And if you look at it, you've only got 7. So for the Ixians, it's actually going to be pretty tough to contest more than 2 strongholds, because you'll have 3 in one, 4 in another, and that's going to be most of your power. You're not going to be dialing cyborgs for strength, because then you're losing out on that ability with the suboids. So you're going to have 6 strength in one place and 8 strength in another, and in the grand scheme of things, that's not really a lot. Especially when you look at factions like the Guild, who are very good at doom stacking to counter you. So they just drop in 15 forces and they're going to beat you, no sweat. So that is one thing to keep in mind. As the Ixians, you want to utilize the fact that the HMS, which we'll get into later, is hard to attack. And you want to utilize an alliance. You want to win with an ally, probably. Because it's going to be tough for you to take 3 strongholds all by yourself. Unless it's either the early game or everyone's very weak and you are not. The other neat thing with the cyborgs is that they have better movement and better collection. So cyborgs, they are able to move 2 territories. So you could go like so. And in addition, any suboids that are with cyborgs also get their movement increased to 2 if they're moving together. And as another plus, cyborgs can carry 3 spice each. So let's say you got the mother load in play. Normally, the collection rate for forces is 2 for each force. And it would be 3 if you have Arakeen or Carthag. However, by default, cyborgs have the full 3 collection rate. So it would only take you 4 forces to collect the entire mother load. Because 3 per force, 4 forces, you get all 12. Now, they do have to be cyborgs, and unlike the movement advantage, suboids don't have their collection rate buffed if they're accompanied by cyborgs. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Essentially, if you haven't noticed, the real theme of this faction, at least with their force ability, is you always want to have at least 1 or 2 cyborgs in any stack. Now, next up is, we got all that. Next up is the HMS, or Hidden Mobile Stronghold. So after the first storm is moved, you're going to place this on any territory in the board. So it's going to go where it's pointing. So let's say Sila goes south. And you can kind of think of this like Habanya Siege. So you see how Habanya Siege is completely surrounded by Habanya Ridge Flat. If you want to get into Habanya Siege, you got to go into the flat and then into the siege. Well, it's the same case here with the HMS. So it's adjacent exclusively to Sea Lagos South. So if you're in Depression and you want to get into the HMS, you have to be able to move into Sea Lagos South and then into the HMS. So it's going to be very tough to get into, especially because the Ixians are the only faction that can ship into the HMS directly. So you can just ship right in. However, any other faction that wants to go here, they're either going to have to be close enough to a stronghold like this where they can ship in there and then move in, or they have to ship directly to the territory and then move in, and that's going to cost double the price. So it's going to be very difficult in most cases to directly attack the HMS. The other thing with the HMS is that during the mentat pause, during the storm phase, before the storm moves, it can actually move 3 territories away. And better yet, you can collect spice with it. So let's say Sea Lagos South is here, nobody collected it, maybe because the storm is here, people are afraid of it, forces dying. During the storm phase, before it moves, you can go 1, 2, 3. And when you move out of, into, or through a territory containing spice, you're going to collect 2 for each force in the HMS. So right now, since there's 6 forces in here, you would collect all 12 of this spice. Now, it should be noted that it doesn't trigger on each of those cases like one after another, right? For example, I move into Sea Lagos South, out of it, and also through it technically. I don't trigger it 3 times. It's only once, and by the strict definition of the rules, you can't move in and out with your 3 movements to collect it multiple times. Because in Dune, movement is point to point. You move 3 territories away, not 3 movements. So, should be noted, it's only 1 collection per phase, but it is still really good. And oftentimes, as the Ixians, if you do go for a spice blow, you might only move a couple forces in just to kill anybody who comes to try to collect it. You can kill them, dial all your forces, and hopefully win the battle, or at the very least, if there's any forces left over, it's only 1 or 2. So then there'll be spice left over for you to collect when you move your HMS later on. Now, the best part about the HMS is that you start with it at the start of the game, and you place it wherever you want. It's going to be very hard to attack, which makes the Ixians a very strong faction in the early game to try to go for early turn 1, 2, or even 3 wins. Now, there's several schools of thought on where you want to place it, and generally where you want to move it. A common one is Sea Lagos South or Sea Lagos Depression, because it's within 3 territories of a lot of spice blows. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. A good spot that I like sometimes if you're feeling risky is Great Flat here, because you're within all of these spice blows. You can get to all of them. But Sea Lagos Depression and Sea Lagos South are pretty common picks because they are not within 3 of any stronghold, which means that you cannot ship from a stronghold and move into the HMS directly. Another good spot, similarly, is Windpass North. It is also not within 3 of any stronghold. However, it is close to the Polar Sink, which is a common spot for people to sit, especially the Bene Gesserit. So it's a bit of a riskier spot, but if nobody's in the Polar Sink, you can't really go too wrong. There is another maneuver that I like to call sieging a stronghold. So if you have a stronghold you plan on attacking that turn, it's often a pretty good move to put the stronghold right next to, put the HMS right next to the stronghold. Because what it means is that you can, let's say, ship to Siege Tabor and move forces into Habanya Siege. And now you've contested 3 strongholds in a single turn. And because you've got that sideboard movement, you can move 2. You can go out of the stronghold, out of the HMS, and then into the stronghold. And then anybody who would be trying to retaliate, they can't get in unless they have ornithopters. So let's just say you've got a... Let's say you got a Tleilaxu here. If they don't have forces in Erkine or Carthage, they don't have ornithopters to be able to move into the HMS. So these guys are pretty safe. And best yet, for every other faction that isn't Tleilaxu, this stronghold is now blocked. So even if they do have ornithopters, they can't even ship into here So that makes the HMS very safe. So this is a really great maneuver if you know all about the card info and you want to be aggressive and go for a win. Allied or not, you can probably pull it off. And then let us look at their advanced game advantages. So they have an advantage called technology. So let's say you have got a shield, or around any card really. When a card is going up for bid and people are bidding on it, before anyone bids and before Atreides looks at it, you can take a card from your hand, face down, and swap it with the one up for bid. So it's essentially a way to get free cards as long as you have anything you want to dump. And it's especially great if you have... Alright, let's see here. It's especially great if you have... Oh, there's none. If you have a worthless card. Let's just say a Truth Chance, because you might not want one. So the great part is that effectively for the Ixians, no card is a bad purchase, because it just means that later on, you can use it to get a different card that you want, maybe. Oops. So, no bad cards for the Ixians. This is actually a really crucial ability for them. It's very strong because it means that they can be risky with bids. No card is bad for them, and especially if they see a good card up for bid with their ability, they can be pretty bold in trying to buy it. A, because they could try buying it right off the bat, but B, if they don't manage to get it, they can try to use their technology advantage for another shot at buying it without having to spend more spice. So, technology, very strong. And then this other one here is just a little bit of clarification that you don't need to spend spice for subvoids in advanced. Now, let's look at that alliance ability, which I mentioned. What their alliance ability is after your ally purchases a treasure card during bidding, they can immediately discard it and draw the top card. So it's a little bit similar to their alliance, to their technology advantage rather, but different in a really crucial way. So let's say your ally, the Tleilaxu, is bidding, and they buy this Truth Chance, and they don't want it. Well, they can discard it and just take the top card, which is hopefully something that they prefer. The great part about this is, though, that when you use your bidding advantage as the Ixians, you can choose to put a card on the top of the deck. And then, when your ally buys a card and chooses to use the alliance ability, that's the card that they're going to end up pulling. So you can use it to essentially say, okay, ally, here's the cards going up for bid. Which one of these do you want? And then you say, oh, Lasgun, I'd like that. So you could say, pull it out and put it on the top of the deck. Then later on, your ally's bidding, they win the card. They use your alliance ability and they pull the top card of the deck, and now you just got them the Lasgun. So the Ixians are one of the strongest allies in the game, not only because they're generally a strong faction, but they have a great ability to alter the bidding and get specifically any card that you want of the ones that you're seeing before bidding. So really great ally, really great to pair with either a combat faction like the Atreides or Bene Gesserit, or a rich faction like the Emperor or the Guild, who are going to be able to buy those cards and also help you buy cards. All right, now let's take some time to talk a little bit about their great strategies for the Ixians and why they're so damn strong. And this fundamentally comes down to information. So the Atreides are very popular for being the information faction. You know, they can keep notes on people's hands, they know what people are buying, and the Ixians, they can't take down notes, but they, in some areas, have a far stronger combat ability. Information ability. So the Atreides, they know what goes up for bid, but there's two types of cards they do not know. Pocket cards and cards drawn from the top of the deck. So your pocket card is the card that you get dealt at the start of the game. The Atreides has no knowledge on that. Other cards that are invisible are the Harkonnen's second card. You also have the card that the Ixians get with their technology advantage and with the alliance advantage. There's also some other niche cases, like the Mauritani can get a card off the top of the deck with their robbery terror token, or the Ikaz can get cards for the top of the deck with their Richesse ambassador or their Ixian ambassador. And those are all types of cards that the Atreides will not be able to see. So while they know which cards factions specifically have, they don't know all the cards in the game. And that's something that the Ixians do know. Because, again, they see those starting 6 treachery cards that are going to be dealt out. And they also see all the cards that go up for bid before they do. They can put a card on the top of the deck to make sure that if any faction is drawing cards off the top of the deck with an ability, as long as they're not doing it more than 2 times per turn, sorry, more than once per turn, you can make sure you know what the top card of the deck is at any time, and you'll know what they're getting. So while the Ixians don't know who has what card, they know what cards are in the game. Now, why is that useful? Well, let's say you, as the Ixians, have a projectile weapon. If there are no shields in the game, that projectile weapon cannot be blocked. So it's basically as good as a poison blade. That's the real strength of this ability. Now, I want to put forward a little example of how you might want to be thinking about this in terms of using this ability and keeping track of the information as it comes up. So, the Ixians cannot take notes, but if you're got a good memory, you can try to remember this type of stuff. So, let's say the starting deal of treachery cards is these cards. Now, in this case, we see here a snooper. These are not great cards, but we see a projectile weapon and no shields. So let's say, hey, as Ixians, we're definitely going to take that. That's definitely the best card up for offer here. Then let's go into the second turn. We've got 6 cards here, and then let's add another one in. So now, what are we going to suppress here? It's tough to say. We see that there's 2 shields. So even if we were to suppress one of these, it would be impossible to get both. There's also another slip tip, another projectile weapon, and there's a poison weapon. Now, there's 2 weapons here, so we can't really choose to get rid of all of the weapons. And in my opinion, there's a lot of weapons. I would say let's get rid of a shield, since that means that our weapon is going to be more effective. What you want to do at this point is you know that there's a card you're keeping an eye on in this bid. You want to see who bids on the first turn and actually buys cards. Because any faction that did not buy a card this turn cannot possibly have a shield. And those are going to be factions on the first turn that you can target and very easily win battles against. So factions like the Fremen, like the Guild, like the Bene Gesserit, like the Tleilaxu, these factions that are usually poor in the early game and probably aren't buying cards, you know that they probably don't have any card that went up in the first bid. And you can say, hey, Fremen are going for a spice blow, I can easily kill them because they can't block my weapon, and hopefully they don't have a weapon of their own, so I can win the battle against them. Then, let's say it comes to the second turn here, and we see that these cards go up for bid. Again, not great cards, but most importantly, there is no shield here. So once again, we keep in mind of a list of factions that did not buy a card in the first turn. Those are factions that are still very susceptible to our projectile weapon because nobody can block it. None of them can block it. They don't have a shield. So these are the kind of things that you could be thinking about as the Ixians to have really good knowledge on what's going on. It's a very strong way to play them, and it's why they're so strong. It's why in some areas they are even stronger than the Atreides. Now, where this is going to fall off in most cases is later into the game, when you start forgetting, and namely, once the discard pile gets shuffled to form the new deck. Now, your information is going to be all out of whack. It's going to be tough to keep track of things at that point. And for the Atreides, that's actually when they increase in strength, because now that you know the deck has been expended, any cards that they haven't seen go up for bid are now the cards that the unknown cards other factions have could be. I think I explained that in a very confusing way. But let's say the Harkonnen has 3 cards that the Atreides don't know. When the deck gets reshuffled, they say, oh, look at that. A shield, a crysknife, and an Alaka drug did not go up for bid. And yet the deck is empty. Therefore, those 3 cards are the 3 cards that the Harkonnen bought that they didn't see. So, later on in the game, the Ixians are definitely still very powerful, but that's when they start to kind of fall off. the main thing you have to worry about as Ixians is running out of spice. Because if you run out of spice, you're going to be very limited in terms of what you can do because you can't buy cards. So if you're going to be seeing the cards that go up for bid, but if you can't buy them, you don't really have a way to adapt to the changing board state. Like, for example, if you see a lot of poison weapons go up and you don't have a snooper and you have no spice, you don't have the ability to try and buy a snooper, which means that there's going to be a lot of weapons out in the field that you cannot counter. So those are the general ideas with Ixians. You need to really keep in mind what cards are in play, what cards can be in people's hands, and who has bid to know what cards they could have. If a faction hasn't bid on any cards, you know that they can only have that one card that got dealt out. So if it's not a projectile weapon, you know you can play a poison defense and they cannot kill you. If it's not a poison defense, then you know that you can play a poison weapon and they cannot block you. That's why they're so strong, and that's why later on in the game, when information gets a little bit fuzzier, it can be tough to remember who has what, and they will be a little bit weaker as a result. So last thing, let's just look at their leader selection real quick. You may notice that it's actually exactly the same spread as the Atreides. 2 5s, a 4, a 2, and a 1. This is arguably, excluding the idea of having high numbers like the Fremen or the Emperor, this is one of the better leader selections in the game because they're very hard to traitor and they still have a lot of high strength leaders. So you got 2 5s and a 4. These are very good. Some factions like the Chom or the Ikaz, 4 is their highest leader. And yet as the Ixians, you have 2 5s on top of that. The other thing is there's no obvious strongest leader. So they have 2 5s, which means that if you have a traitor for, let's say, Tessia Vernius, one of their 5s, I might just randomly choose Sater instead, and now you can't call traitor on me. One of the strongest things to have is a traitor of a faction's highest leader, because that kind of lowers the bar of how strong they can be in a fight. It effectively reduces their max dial. But even if someone has a traitor for your 5, you could, by getting information on a safe leader or just by luck, you could play your other highest leader, not get traitored, and still maintain your max dial of 5 plus whatever you have in the territory. So that makes them very strong in that sense. And those are the strengths and strategies of the Ixians. This is one of the strongest factions in the game. They're not my favorite to play, but they are definitely very strong. If you have that sort of analytical mind, you have, a photographic memory, or you got some sort of mnemonic strategies, these could be a very fun faction for you, and quite successful to boot. So that's going to do it for this video, and if you enjoyed it, let me know. Let me know any memorable Ixian games you've seen. But for now, that's going to do it. I'll catch y'all later.